Hi, I'm Vicki Roberts with Bloomberg Law. I'm here at the Executive Employer Conference held by Littler in Phoenix. Joining me is Stacey Adams, a shareholder with Littler, and we're going to talk about two of the issues facing retailers when it comes to wage and hour. We're going to look at predictive scheduling and minimum wage issues. So let's start with predictive scheduling. Stacey, can you give us an overview of this fairly emerging type of law and talk about some of the pitfalls employers are facing as they try to comply?
Sure, Vicki. Retailers in the U.S. face issues that are very unique to them. And here at Littler, we try to focus on some of those issues and how to deal with them. One of the ones that has really popped up and has been troublesome as of late is the predictive scheduling ordinances, and we're seeing them pop up across the country in places like Oregon and certain jurisdictions in California, New York City. And what these laws basically require is a few things. They require employers, retail employers, to give their employees at least 2 weeks notice of their schedule before they're required to come into work. And they're required that if they're on call, that they be given certain notice before their schedules are canceled, in order to give them some predictability in their work-life balance and their schedules. But it's very hard for retailers to deal with those types of issues because a lot of times they can't predict things like the weather or how busy their business may be on a certain day, or if some of their scheduled employees might call out for one reason or another. And what happens is they do need to make last minute changes, so it presents a lot of challenges, and they can be penalized in the form of, for example, having to pay fines or having to pay the employers for the missed shifts or the canceled shifts. It presents a lot of challenges.
So it seems like legislatures have enacted these laws in order to give employees a little bit more predictability so that they can get to their jobs, so they can schedule their lives, so they can figure out daycare issues. But there's a lot of unintended consequences from your experience. Is that right?
I think that is exactly right, Vicki. And I can give you a real life example of that. Recently, we have a retail client in New York City, and there was a massive snowstorm, and the law does provide certain exceptions for when you can cancel a shift or cancel employees' shift without giving the requisite notice. One of those would be if there was, for example, a state of emergency declared by a federal or a state executive like the governor. And in this particular instance, we knew 15 inches of snow was coming. I don't know about you, but I'm not going shopping when there's 15 inches of snow on the ground. And my client was calling me all night saying, has the governor declared a state of emergency? Because if not, we're going to have to tell all these employees either they have to come into work in the snow, or we're going to cancel their shifts, and then we're going to have to pay them anyway, and we could possibly get fined. How do we deal with it? And in this particular instance, for whatever reason, no state of emergency was ever called. And it was a tough situation for the employer to handle, and that's the type of unintended consequence that you see in the way this legislation is drafted.
Right.
Another challenge is that it's not everywhere. So you have these companies that have scheduling systems, automated scheduling systems all over the country, but there's only certain jurisdictions where this is required. And it's a struggle and a challenge to figure out how to balance that.
Right. So what does an employer who's subject to these laws do? What are the best strategies for compliance?
Well, that's a very good question and a challenge that I think we're all still trying to figure out together. I know that it was something that we discussed at length in the retail session at yesterday's employer conference, and we're all figuring this out together. Some employers are doing manual scheduling in the jurisdictions where predictive scheduling is required. Others are trying to modify their automated systems, but I don't think anyone has come up with an app yet for dealing with predictive scheduling laws. I'm sure somebody will soon.
Okay, so still developing.
Yes.
We've got about a minute left, so let's turn to minimum wage and the patchwork of minimum wage laws out there, federal, state, local, they're everywhere. Can you talk about some of the problems and then some of the best practices?
Yeah, they are patchwork. That's the perfect word to describe them. And the problem is that you have the federal minimum wage, then you have state minimum wage laws, and then now you have certain laws that are directed particularly at the retail industry and the fast food industry that are requiring even higher minimum wage for people, workers in the retail business. So, for example, New York and California have legislation that would require the minimum wage for retailers to be increased to $15 by 2022, and that could impact employee jobs. If the retailers can't afford to do that, there may be less jobs. It could affect the price of product for consumers. They may have to raise the cost of the sweater I'm wearing in order to cover the higher costs, and those are things that are directed just at retailers.
Okay, so what's the best practice for keeping up with all this and for managing the patchwork?
I mean, I think the law is the law. If you have a store in a city that has one of these minimum wage ordinances, you have to comply with it. I think the challenge is going to be, I had a retailer yesterday say, well, we just said don't open any more stores in the city because we can't deal with this patchwork legislation. And I think that's the type of thing you might be seeing, but it's going to be a challenge and perhaps a morale issue when you have employees, for example, in New York City earning one salary, and then employees right across the bridge in New Jersey earning something lower than that because the laws aren't there.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Stacey, for your insights, and thank you all for joining us.